She believed she could bridge the vast silent gap between human and beast. Maris Ellington stood at the edge of the world, a place where the deep blue of the tank met the polished concrete of her stage. For years, this was her sanctuary, a space where she communed with one of nature's most magnificent predators. Her life was a testament to the idea that understanding and respect could tame the wild heart of the ocean. But on one fateful evening, under the stormy coastal twilight of Virginia, that belief would be shattered. A single violent surge would transform years of cultivated trust into a horrifying and irreversible tragedy. The bond she cherished became the very thing that sealed her doom. The story of Maris Ellington is a chilling reminder of nature's untamable power. It is a tale that unfolds at Virginia's renowned Tidewater Marine Center, a place celebrated for its research and spectacular marine shows. Here, thousands of visitors would gather, mesmerized by the choreographed dance between woman and whale. They saw grace, intelligence, and a seemingly unbreakable connection. What they did not see were the subtle warnings, the silent signals of a storm brewing beneath the surface. This is the story of those last moments, a terrifying account of an attack that no one saw coming, yet one that was tragically predictable in hindsight. What could possibly unleash such deadly wrath from a creature she had known and worked with for years? This question hangs heavy over the events of that day. Was it a sudden, inexplicable snap? Or was it the culmination of countless unseen pressures, the slow burn of a wild spirit confined within concrete walls? We will dive deep into the heart of this gripping tale, exploring the complex relationship between Maris and the orca she loved. We will investigate the science, the psychology, and the series of overlooked red flags that paved the way for disaster. The answers are as complex and profound as the ocean itself. Join us as we piece together the terrifying last moments of orca trainer Maris Ellington. This is more than just a recount of a shocking attack. It is a vital exploration of the line between human ambition and nature's raw, indomitable fury. Can we ever truly outrun the instincts hardwired into a predator over millennia? The lessons learned from this tragedy are not just for marine biologists or animal trainers. They are life-saving insights for anyone who dares to venture close to the wild. Stay with us for a story that will leave you breathless. A story that serves as a powerful cautionary tale for us all. The evening of June 2nd, 2025 began like so many others at the Tidewater Marine Center. The air was thick with the humid, salty scent of the nearby Chesapeake Bay, and a sense of anticipation buzzed through the packed arena. Families settled into their seats, their faces illuminated by the vibrant lights of the show pool. Maris Ellington, a beacon of confidence and passion, took her place at the water's edge, her presence commanding the attention of both the crowd and the colossal creature gliding below. This was the grand finale, the climactic end to another day of dazzling performances, a spectacle of interspecies harmony that had become her signature. As the show music swelled, Maris began to signal the orca, Kale, for their final sequence of behaviors. These were routines they had practiced thousands of times, a fluid dialogue of gestures and responses honed over 7 years. But on this night, something was different. A subtle hesitation crept into Kale's movements, a flicker of discord in their usually perfect synchrony. The powerful, graceful arcs he was known for became slightly faltering, his immense body seeming to carry a tension that was imperceptible to the cheering audience. Maris, ever the professional, pressed on, perhaps believing it was a momentary lapse, a minor hiccup in their well-oiled performance. The final cue was for a spectacular splash, a wave that would thrill the front rows and signal the end of the show. Maris raised her hand, her eyes locked on the 10,000-pound whale. But instead of responding to the familiar signal, Kale's movements ceased altogether. He grew still in the water, his massive form a dark, unmoving shape against the pool's bright blue floor. His eyes, usually so engaged and responsive, were now fixed on her with an unnerving intensity. In that terrifying pause, the rhythm of the show broke, and a new, unspoken narrative began to unfold, one of primal instinct overriding years of training. Without warning, the illusion of control was violently torn away. With a deafening roar of displaced water, Kale lunged. It was not a choreographed leap, but a raw explosion of predatory power. He seized Maris by the torso, his immense jaws closing with devastating force, and dragged her from the platform into the churning depths of the pool. The crowd's cheers turned to panicked screams as the water erupted in a chaotic frenzy. The bond that had defined Maris's life had, in one horrific instant, become the instrument of her death, marking the beginning of a desperate and harrowing struggle for survival. Maris Ellington was a product of the Virginia coastline, a woman whose life was shaped by the rhythmic crash of Atlantic waves. Born and raised in Norfolk, her destiny seemed written in the tides from a very young age. At just 7 years old, a formative experience set her on a lifelong path. Perched on her father's shoulders during a whale-watching tour off Virginia Beach, she witnessed the breathtaking sight of a pod of orcas breaching against the horizon. The image of their powerful monochrome bodies soaring from the depths and crashing back into the sea was imprinted on her mind. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated awe that sparked a fire within her, a passion that would define her entire existence. This childhood fascination evolved into a serious academic pursuit. Maris dedicated herself to understanding the ocean and its most intelligent inhabitants. She excelled in her studies, eventually earning a master's degree in marine biology from Old Dominion University, where her research focused on the complex cognitive abilities of cetaceans. Her work was not just about data and observation, it was driven by a profound empathy for these creatures. She joined the Tidewater Marine Center in 2018, quickly distinguishing herself as a uniquely gifted and compassionate trainer. Her colleagues saw her not just as a scientist, but as a true visionary, someone who could communicate with these animals on a deeper level. Her dedication did not go unnoticed. By 2024, Maris was a rising star in the marine biology community, a celebrated figure at the Tidewater Marine Center. Her innovative work on orca cognition, which challenged many preconceived notions about their intelligence and emotional capacity, earned her the prestigious Coastal Conservation Award. Maris believed that by showcasing the profound intelligence of orcas, she could inspire a new generation of ocean advocates. She saw the shows not as mere entertainment, but as powerful educational platforms. Her mission was to close the gap between humanity and the marine world, one breathtaking performance at a time. For Maris, this was more than a job. It was a calling. She poured every ounce of her being into her work, often spending long hours at the center, long after the crowds had gone home. She would sit by the tank, documenting Cale's behaviors, talking to him, playing music she thought he might enjoy. She truly believed that a bond of mutual respect and understanding was possible, even within the artificial confines of an aquarium. This conviction was the bedrock of her career and the source of her fame. It was also, tragically, the source of a profound and fatal overconfidence in the relationship she had so carefully built. The other half of this celebrated partnership was Cale, a magnificent 15-year-old male orca. His life story was a stark contrast to Maris's, one marked by trauma and displacement. He was not born in the sterile environment of a marine park, but in the vast, cold waters of the North Atlantic. In 2013, as a young calf, he became entangled in a fishing net off the coast of Newfoundland. He was rescued, but the traumatic event separated him forever from his family pod and the endless expanse of his natural habitat. Cale was deemed non-releasable due to his young age and the injuries he sustained, and so his journey into captivity began at the Tidewater Marine Center. At Tidewater, Cale grew into an impressive 10,000-pound adult, a titan of the tank. For years, he was the star attraction, captivating audiences with his intelligence and seeming eagerness to perform. He learned complex routines, from synchronized spins with his trainers to powerful, crowd-pleasing splashes. To the thousands of visitors who saw him each year, he was a symbol of the ocean's majesty, a gentle giant who seemed to thrive under human care. His partnership with Maris was particularly lauded, a seemingly perfect example of interspecies cooperation and friendship. They were the heart and soul of the Tidewater shows, a testament to the center's mission. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic picture, the grim realities of captivity were taking their toll. The confinement was a constant gnawing stressor for an animal designed to roam hundreds of miles of open ocean. This stress manifested in disturbing ways that were largely invisible to the cheering crowds. Cale's teeth were a clear sign of his distress. They were worn down to the gums, a common and painful condition in captive orcas caused by chronically chewing on the concrete walls and metal gates of their enclosure. This behavior, known as jaw-popping, was a physical outlet for his psychological anguish. Beyond the physical damage, there were behavioral red flags. When not performing, Cale would often spend hours floating listlessly in one spot, a behavior starkly different from the constant motion of his wild counterparts. At other times, he would emit sharp, piercing vocalizations, sounds that trainers recognized as expressions of agitation or frustration. These were the subtle but persistent signs of a spirit being slowly eroded by an unnatural existence. While Cale performed his duties for the crowd, his true state was one of quiet desperation, a building pressure that was steadily approaching its breaking point. His world was shrinking, and his patience was wearing thin. The relationship between Maris and Cale was the centerpiece of the Tidewater Marine Center's public image. For 7 years, they had worked together, day in and day out. Maris had been there since Cale was a maturing adolescent, guiding him through his training and becoming the most consistent presence in his life. She was his primary caregiver, his trainer, and, in her own mind, his closest companion. Their connection was undeniably deep, built on thousands of hours of interaction, shared routines, and what Maris interpreted as mutual trust and affection. She could read his subtle moods, anticipate his actions, and communicate with him through a complex language of hand signals and vocal cues. This bond was the driving force behind Maris's passionate advocacy. She genuinely believed she understood Cale better than anyone else on Earth. When she spoke about him, her voice was filled with a mix of scientific respect and personal warmth. She would tell reporters and visitors that Cale was not just an animal performing tricks. He was a thinking, feeling individual with a distinct personality. She saw their interactions as a two-way street, a conversation between equals. This belief was intoxicating, not only for her but for the public and the institution she represented. It transformed a captive animal's performance into a heartwarming story of friendship against all odds. Orcas possess the second-largest brain of all marine mammals. They exhibit complex social structures, communication, and problem-solving skills, according to NOAA Fisheries. However, the very foundation of this bond was rooted in an inherently unbalanced power dynamic. Cale was completely dependent on Maris and the other trainers for food, stimulation, and social interaction. His entire world was managed and controlled. While Maris saw trust, some behavioral experts might see conditioned dependency. While she saw affection, others might see a predictable response for a food reward. The tragedy of their relationship was that Maris's profound empathy and love for Cale may have blinded her to the fact that their bond existed only within the confines of his prison. She saw a partner, but she was, in reality, his keeper. This deep personal connection ultimately clouded her professional judgment. Her confidence in their unique relationship made her feel impervious to the dangers that other trainers were taught to respect. She believed their bond transcended the typical predator-prey instinct, that Cale would never harm her because of the history they shared. This faith in their connection became a dangerous liability. She saw the whale, but perhaps she failed to see the wild predator that always lurked within. A predator whose instincts were being twisted and strained by the unnatural pressures of his confined life. Her love made her feel safe when she was, in fact, in mortal danger. In early summer 2025, Cale's world began to unravel. A new underwater speaker system, meant to enhance the show, emitted a high-frequency buzz, painful to Cale, though inaudible to humans. His agitation grew. Long, listless floats interrupted by violent bursts, ramming the tank, and sharp, distressed calls. Staff raised alarms, urging a pause in shows and a check on the equipment, fearing Cale was reaching a breaking point. Maris, confident in their bond, dismissed these warnings, convinced she could soothe him through routine and trust. She overrode protocol, pushing forward with daily shows, certain their connection would prevail. This decision, rooted in love and hubris, marked a critical turning point. Unaware, Maris stood on a fault line, the ground about to give way. Orcas speak through action. Circling, tail slaps, piercing vocalizations. Under stress, their signals are unmistakable. On June 2nd, Cale rammed the tank wall with unprecedented force, sending shockwaves through the water and staff. His frantic calls echoed distress, the speaker's buzz pushing him past his limit. Staff were shaken. This was no minor outburst, but a desperate cry for help. Maris logged the event, linking it to the speakers, but saw it as a plea for her support, not a warning. She believed her presence could calm him, missing the threat beneath the surface. Cale's violence was a language Maris refused to hear. The danger was no longer hidden. Alarmed, trainers urged Maris to cancel the show and suspend waterwork with Cale. They cited his escalating distress, agitation, aggression, and now violence, as a clear warning. Industry best practices demanded caution, but Maris was unmoved. Her faith in their bond overrode all advice. She saw herself as the exception. She dismissed her team's concerns as overreaction, insisting she could manage Cale. Her authority was final. the show would go on. Isolated by her confidence, Maris faced Kale alone, blind to the looming catastrophe. The final chance for safety slipped away. As the evening show began, tension simmered behind the scenes. Kale's performance was sluggish, his responses delayed, a clear sign of distress to any expert. The audience saw spectacle, trainers saw a crisis. When Maris cued him for a close approach, Kale refused, floating motionless, ignoring her signals. In animal training, this refusal is a red flag. Protocol demands the show stop. Maris pressed on, trying to re-engage him, erasing the last buffer of safety. She had ignored every warning, every off-ramp. The stage was set for disaster. The arena was thick with tension as Kale floated, unmoving, defying the script. The crowd waited, unaware. Only the staff recognized the danger in his stillness. Maris, unwavering, gave the final signal. One last attempt to reclaim control. Kale did not move, his gaze fixed on her. The bond she trusted now gone. Instinct, not training, filled the void. The gentle giant was gone, replaced by a predator pushed too far. The final warning had been given and ignored. The stillness was the last breath before the storm. The stillness shattered in an instant. With a sound like a thunderclap, the surface of the water erupted. Kale exploded from his static position, not with the graceful arc of a trained leap, but with the raw, propulsive force of a predator striking its prey. He crossed the distance of the pool in a terrifyingly short amount of time, a black and white torpedo of muscle and rage aimed directly at Maris. The crowd's anticipatory murmurs turned into a collective gasp of shock as they realized this was not part of the show. The sheer speed and aggression of the movement were utterly alien to the gentle performances they were used to seeing. Before Maris could even react, he was upon her. There was no hesitation, no warning bite, only a full-blown, committed attack. Kale's immense jaws, capable of a bite force of over 19,000 pounds per square inch, closed around her torso. The impact lifted her clean off the concrete platform, her small frame dwarfed by his colossal head. The carefully constructed barrier between the human world and the wild ocean was obliterated in that single violent motion. He had her, and he was pulling her back into his world, a world of water and power, where he was the undisputed king, and she was utterly helpless. A wave of panic and horror washed over the arena. The cheerful music cut out abruptly, replaced by a cacophony of panicked screams from the thousands of spectators. Children cried and adults pointed in disbelief, their minds struggling to process the horrific scene unfolding before them. What had been a place of family entertainment and wonder was instantaneously transformed into a scene of primal terror. The illusion of safety and control was stripped away, revealing the brutal reality of a powerful predator asserting its dominance with lethal force. The controlled environment of the Tidewater Marine Center had become a life-and-death battleground. As Kale dragged Maris under the surface, the water boiled in a frenzy of violent motion. He began to roll, a natural hunting behavior orcas use to disorient and disable their prey. This thrashing, known as a death roll, was a devastatingly effective maneuver, ensuring that his target could not fight back or escape. For Maris, it was a terrifying, disorienting nightmare. Plunged into the depths and spun violently, she would have had no sense of up or down, her lungs screaming for air as the immense pressure of Kale's grip crushed the breath from her body. The fatal encounter had begun in earnest. The moment Maris was pulled into the water, the Tidewater Marine Center's emergency response plan was activated. Alarms blared through the facility, and trainers sprang into action. Their faces were grim, their movements urgent but practiced. They immediately began slapping the surface of the water with buckets, a technique designed to create loud, distracting noise to try and get the orca's attention and make it release its target. Other staff members rushed to deploy specially designed emergency nets, hoping to corral Kale and separate him from Maris, but the attempt was futile from the start. Kale was in a state of hyper-arousal, completely ignoring the distractions. He was a 10,000-pound force of pure, enraged instinct, and the flimsy net stood no chance against his power. He tore through them as if they were made of thread, his focus remaining locked on Maris. The chaos in the water was immense, a turbulent vortex of white foam and thrashing limbs. He would drag her deep into the tank, then surface for a moment before pulling her down again, parading her around the pool in a terrifying display of dominance. The trainers were helpless, forced to watch from the edge as the whale they had raised and cared for carried out his brutal attack. The ordeal stretched on for what felt like an eternity. For 20 harrowing minutes, the battle raged. A team of emergency divers stood by at the edge of the pool, but they were unable to enter the water. It was simply too dangerous. Entering the tank with a hyper-aggressive 5-ton orca would have been a suicide mission. They could only watch and wait for an opportunity, a moment when Kale might release her long enough for a rescue attempt. Every second that ticked by lessened her chances of survival, as the dual horrors of her physical injuries and drowning took their toll. The crowd remained frozen in a state of horrified shock, many filming the tragic event on their phones, while others were led away by security staff. The scene was one of utter pandemonium, a nightmare brought to life under the bright stadium lights. The trainers continued their desperate efforts, using every tool and technique at their disposal, but nothing worked. Kale was relentless. The 20 minutes of terror were a stark and brutal testament to the absolute power of a killer whale and the complete helplessness of humans when an animal of that magnitude decides to attack. It was a lesson learned in the most tragic way possible. After 20 minutes that stretched into an agonizing lifetime, the frenzy began to subside. As abruptly as the attack had begun, it ended. Kale, his rage seemingly spent, finally released Maris from his grip. Her limp body floated to the surface in the now eerily quiet water. He swam a slow, deliberate circle around her before moving to the far side of the tank, his agitation replaced by an unsettling calm. It was the moment the rescue team had been desperately waiting for. With Kale now at a distance, the divers were given the signal to go, plunging into the deep to retrieve her. The rescue was swift and solemn. The divers carefully secured Maris and brought her to the side of the pool, where a team of paramedics was waiting. They lifted her from the water and immediately began emergency medical procedures, working frantically to save her life. The extent of her injuries was immediately apparent and devastating. The force of Kale's grip and the violent thrashing had resulted in catastrophic internal damage, including multiple crushed ribs and severe trauma to her vital organs. But the ultimate cause of death was determined to be drowning, a direct result of being held underwater for so long. Despite the heroic efforts of the first responders, it was too late. Maris Ellington was pronounced dead at the scene. In the aftermath, a heavy silence fell over the Tidewater Marine Center. The once vibrant arena was now a grim, cordoned-off scene, the water a silent testament to the tragedy that had unfolded. Kale was isolated in a back medical pool, where he would remain under close observation. The attack had not only ended a promising life, but had also shattered the carefully crafted image of the institution. The story of interspecies harmony had been replaced by a brutal tale of violence and death, reigniting a fierce and emotional global debate about the ethics of keeping such intelligent and powerful creatures in captivity. The news of Maris's death sent shockwaves through Norfolk and the wider marine biology community. She was a beloved figure, a passionate advocate for the animals she loved, and her death felt like a profound betrayal of the very ideals she stood for. Her story became a tragic symbol, a rallying cry for activists who had long argued that orcas, with their complex social needs and vast natural ranges, simply cannot thrive within the concrete walls of an aquarium. Maris's fatal encounter with Kale became the latest and one of the most poignant arguments in the long-standing fight to end orca captivity once and for all. In the frantic chaos of the attack on Maris Ellington, the emergency response, while immediate, was tragically hampered by the circumstances of the encounter itself. The primary failure was not in the actions of the responding team, but in the inherent risks of the waterwork Maris was conducting. Her position at the pool's edge, with no physical barrier between her and a 5-ton predator, meant that once the attack began, a successful rescue was nearly impossible. The first line of defense in any animal incident is distance and barriers, and in this case, there were none. This proximity, once celebrated as a sign of their bond, became the single greatest obstacle to saving her life. The emergency protocols in place at Tidewater, such as using distraction buckets and deployment nets, were standard industry practice at the time, but proved woefully inadequate against a determined and enraged orca. Kale's immense power and single-minded focus rendered these tools useless. The nets were shredded, and the acoustic distractions were ignored, highlighting a critical flaw in relying on methods that depend on the animal's cooperation. The response plan did not, and honestly could not, account for a situation where the animal was completely unresponsive to human intervention. It was a plan built for managing a difficult animal, not for surviving an all-out assault from an apex predator. Furthermore, the delay in providing medical attention was a direct consequence of the prolonged nature of the attack. While paramedics and a full trauma kit were on site, they were forced to be bystanders. They could not reach Maris until Cale released her, and by then, 20 critical minutes had passed. The golden hour for trauma care had slipped away while she was still in the water. This underscores a vital lesson. For high-risk animal interactions, immediate medical accessibility is paramount. The inability for divers to safely enter the water to extract her meant that the medical response was effectively on hold, a fatal delay that sealed her fate long before she was pulled from the pool. The investigation following the incident revealed these shortcomings in stark detail. It concluded that while the staff acted bravely and followed their training, the situation was untenable from the moment Cale lunged. The tragedy exposed the fundamental truth that no emergency plan can fully mitigate the dangers of close, unprotected contact with an animal of such scale and power. The incident became a catalyst for a radical rethinking of safety, forcing the industry to confront the reality that the only way to prevent such a tragedy from happening again was to fundamentally change the way humans and orcas interact in captivity. In the wake of Maris Ellington's death, a seismic shift occurred in marine park safety protocols across the globe. The era of trainers performing in the water with orcas, or even working unprotected at the pool's edge, came to an abrupt and necessary end. Regulatory bodies like OSHA intervened, implementing stringent new guidelines that mandated a new philosophy-protected contact. This principle dictates that a permanent, reinforced physical barrier must always be present between the trainer and the animal. The days of touching, riding, and swimming with killer whales were over, replaced by a system that prioritizes human safety above all else. Modern aquariums that continue to house orcas now look vastly different behind the scenes. Trainers conduct all sessions from raised platforms that are set back from the water's edge or from behind high, reinforced steel barriers. Many interactions now rely on remote tools and targets, allowing trainers to cue behaviors from a safe distance. The hands-on, tactile relationship that Maris Ellington believed was so essential has been replaced by a more distant, observation-based approach. While some argue this diminishes the connection, it undeniably saves lives by removing the possibility of another trainer being dragged into the water. This change acknowledges that no bond can ever fully erase a wild animal's predatory instincts. Another significant change has been the empowerment of all staff to halt a show or interaction. The tragedy at Tidewater highlighted the danger of a top-down hierarchy, where a senior trainer's judgment could override the concerns of the team. Today, protocols in reputable facilities empower any staff member, regardless of rank, to call a stop to a session if they observe any red flag behaviors like aggressive vocalizations, jaw-popping, or erratic swimming. This creates a culture of shared responsibility for safety, ensuring that warning signs are never again dismissed due to one person's overconfidence or emotional investment. The animal's behavior, not a trainer's belief, is now the ultimate authority. Ultimately, the most profound lesson learned was that the needs of the animal must be prioritized to prevent the buildup of stress that leads to aggression. This includes a much deeper focus on environmental enrichment, larger and more complex habitats, and a complete cessation of interactions when stressors are present. The focus has shifted from performance to welfare. Maris's death served as a brutal, indelible reminder that a captive orca is still a wild animal, and when its physical and psychological needs are not met, the consequences can be devastating for the humans who share its world. The death of Maris Ellington became more than just a headline. It became a powerful catalyst for the anti-captivity movement. Her story, so full of passion and tragedy, was amplified by documentaries and animal welfare campaigns all around the world. It put a human face on the dangers of keeping orcas in concrete tanks, making what was once an abstract debate deeply personal for the public. Activists pointed to Maris, a woman who loved and understood orcas perhaps more than anyone, as the ultimate proof that these animals are fundamentally unsuited for a life of confinement and performance. If it could happen to her, it could really happen to anyone. Her death became a rallying cry to end the practice for good. This surge in public awareness and pressure has led to tangible legislative and corporate change. In 2016, California passed a law banning orca captivity for entertainment purposes, which was a truly monumental step. Major marine parks have announced they will phase out their orca shows and end their breeding programs, effectively ensuring that the current generation of captive orcas will be the last. These changes are a direct legacy of the hard lessons learned from Maris's death, transforming her personal tragedy into a force for systemic reform in how we view and treat these magnificent animals. The conversation has now shifted toward a more ethical and humane alternative: seaside sanctuaries. These are large, enclosed ocean pens that would allow retired or non-releasable captive orcas to live in a more natural environment, feeling the tides and currents and interacting with marine life without the stress of performing. While still in the early stages, the sanctuary movement is gaining momentum, offering a compassionate solution for the remaining captive population. This forward-thinking approach is part of Maris's legacy, honoring her love for these animals by striving to give them a life of dignity, far from the demands of public entertainment. By sharing Maris's story, we do not dishonor her memory or her passion. Instead, we ensure her death was not in vain. We honor her by learning from it, by advocating for stronger protections for both trainers and animals, and by supporting a future where orcas can thrive in the vast ocean that is their true home. Her light, though tragically extinguished, continues to illuminate the path toward a more respectful and compassionate relationship with the natural world. It is a powerful reminder that we must always respect the wild, not just for our own safety, but for the well-being of the incredible creatures we share this planet with. The tragic death of Maris Ellington sent a seismic shockwave far beyond the walls of the Tidewater Marine Center, reigniting the global debate on orca captivity with renewed ferocity. Her story became a powerful and poignant symbol for animal welfare advocates around the world. They argued that if an expert like Maris, with her deep knowledge, profound love, and 7-year bond with Kale, could fall victim to such a violent attack, then no one was safe. Her death was presented as the ultimate irrefutable evidence that orcas, with their immense intelligence, complex social structures, and vast natural ranges, simply cannot be contained within concrete tanks without suffering severe psychological damage that inevitably leads to dangerous, unpredictable behavior. This single devastating event mobilized a new generation of activists and brought the issue to the forefront of public consciousness in a way few things had before. Documentaries, news articles, and social media campaigns seized upon the narrative, contrasting the beautiful, smiling images of Maris with the brutal reality of her final moments. This created a simple, powerful, and emotionally resonant message. Captivity kills, not just the animals, but the people who love them. The incident provided the anti-captivity movement with a martyr, transforming a complex issue into a clear-cut moral crusade against the confinement of these magnificent creatures for human entertainment. The public outcry was immense and sustained, placing unprecedented pressure on marine parks and regulatory bodies. Petitions demanding an end to orca shows garnered millions of signatures. The stock prices of publicly traded marine park corporations plummeted as consumers began to vote with their wallets, choosing to boycott institutions that held orcas. The narrative that Maris herself had championed, that these shows were educational, was turned on its head. Critics argued that the only lesson being taught was one of animal cruelty, and that Maris's death was the tragic graduation ceremony. The tide of public opinion was turning, and the industry was facing a storm of its own making. This profound shift in public sentiment led directly to significant legislative action. Politicians who had previously ignored the issue were now forced to address it. Taking cues from landmark legislation like California's 2016 ban on orca breeding and entertainment, lawmakers in other coastal states began introducing similar bills. The fight for change, fueled by the memory of Maris Ellington, had moved from the streets and the internet into the halls of power. Her personal tragedy had become a political catalyst, forcing a society-wide reevaluation of the ethics of keeping the ocean's greatest predator in a swimming pool, and setting the stage for the end of an era. As the pressure to end orca captivity mounted, a new and hopeful conversation began to emerge from the tragedy: the push for seaside sanctuaries. This innovative concept offered a compassionate and practical answer to the difficult question of what to do with existing captive orcas who could never be released into the wild. Unlike the sterile, confined environment of a concrete tank, a seaside sanctuary would be a large, netted-off coastal bay or cove. It would provide these animals with a space orders of magnitude larger and more complex than any aquarium, allowing them to experience natural ocean currents, tides, and marine flora and fauna. The sanctuary model is not about returning orcas to the wild, which is impossible for animals that have spent their lives in captivity, dependent on humans. Instead, it is about retirement, providing them with a dignified end to their lives, free from the stress of daily performances and constant public exposure. In a sanctuary, orcas like Kale could live out their days in a more naturalistic setting, engaging in behaviors like deeper dives and foraging that are impossible in a shallow pool. This solution honors their nature while acknowledging the reality of their circumstances, offering a middle ground between a concrete tank and the open ocean. The movement to create these sanctuaries has gained significant momentum, with organizations working to secure funding and locations worldwide. This approach directly addresses the root cause of the aggression that led to Maris's death, the immense psychological stress of confinement. By providing a more stimulating and natural environment, sanctuaries aim to reduce chronic stress, boredom, and frustration that lead to dangerous behaviors. It is a proactive, welfare-focused solution that learns from the hard lessons of the past, striving to create a future where the animal's well-being is the sole priority. This fight for a new solution is perhaps the most fitting tribute to Maris Ellington's legacy. While her life's work was dedicated to bridging the gap between humans and orcas within the existing system, her death has inspired a movement to create a better system altogether. The push for sanctuaries honors her profound love for these animals by seeking to provide them with the best possible life after their service is over. It transforms her tragic end into a hopeful beginning, paving the way for a future where no other trainer pays the ultimate price and no orca suffers the consequences of confinement. The story of Maris Ellington is a heartbreaking epic of passion, dedication, and the unforgiving power of nature. She was a woman who looked into the eye of an ocean giant and saw not a monster, but a kindred spirit, an intelligent being worthy of respect and understanding. Her life was a testament to the profound connections that can be forged between humans and animals, a bond she believed could transcend the concrete walls of the Tidewater Marine Center. The tragedy lies not in her love for Kale, but in the devastating reality that love alone cannot tame the ancient, wild instincts of an apex predator pushed beyond its endurance by the stresses of an unnatural world. Her story serves as a stark and eternal reminder that the line between admiration and hubris is perilously thin. We must remember Maris not for the terrifying final moments of her life, but for the unwavering passion that defined it. She dedicated her career to educating the world about the incredible intelligence and emotional depth of orcas, and in a tragic, roundabout way, her death accomplished that mission on a scale she never could have imagined. It forced a global conversation, compelling society to look beyond the spectacular splashes and confront the ethical dilemma at the heart of orca captivity. Her legacy is written in the legislative changes, the corporate policy shifts, and the growing movement to provide these creatures with a more dignified existence in seaside sanctuaries. It is a legacy of profound and lasting change. The lessons learned from that fateful day on June 2, 2025 are etched into the safety protocols of every marine institution today. The implementation of protected contact, the empowerment of staff to halt interactions, and the renewed focus on animal welfare over entertainment are all direct results of the sacrifice she made. By understanding the failures that led to her death, we have created a safer world for the next generation of trainers and caregivers. We honor her memory not by turning away from these magnificent animals, but by approaching them with a newfound humility, a deeper respect for their power, and an unwavering commitment to their well-being above all else. Ultimately, Maris Ellington's story is a call to action. It urges us to respect the inherent wildness of nature, to question the ethics of confinement, and to advocate for a more compassionate relationship with the creatures we share this planet with. Her light, tragically extinguished in the churning waters of Kale's tank, burns on in the fight for change she inspired. It challenges us all to be better stewards of the natural world, ensuring that such a tragedy is never repeated. Maris Ellington believed she could bridge the gap between human and beast. Her legacy now tasks us with the responsibility of truly honoring that bridge by respecting the boundaries that must never be crossed.